God wants people to call me crazy and a fool, he says, covered in tattered clothes and an unkempt beard. A child is born. While the infant is still young, his father dies, and thus his father's name is passed to the infant. After some time, his mother remarries and leaves him in the care of his paternal relatives. Living with them, the infant grows to boyhood, enters elementary school, begins working in the fields. Around his late teens, early 20s, it's said that he evaded military service. Some say he went instead to receive a theological education, learning many languages. All in all, nothing can truly be verified about his early life. God told me to wear old clothes, not costumes. It's reported that whether it's winter or summer, cold or hot, he walks around barefoot. Around his neck is a wooden cross that he's carved by himself, and around his waist is an old bag filled with oil that he uses to light various chapels around the countryside. By night, he sleeps in a cave or a chapel, and occasionally he's seen carrying a lamp with a flame from the holy light of Jerusalem. By day, he travels from village to village, begging for money and food. And when he's spared some extra change or food, he immediately gives it to the poor. He dances in public. On one occasion, he's seen dancing with girls, and quite scandalized, people confront him. "I'm imitating Andrew, the fool," he says. Blessed Andrew, the fool for Christ, lives in the 10th century, Constantinople. Once, during a dream, the saint beholds a vision of two armies. In the one are men in radiant garb. In the other, black and fearsome devils. An angel of God who holds wondrous crowns says to Andrew that these crowns are not adornments from the earthly world, but rather a celestial treasure with which the Lord rewards his warriors, victorious over the dark hordes. Proceed with this good deed, the angel says to Andrew. Be a fool for my sake, and you will receive much in the day of my kingdom. The saint perceives that this is Christ himself, summoning him to this deed. From that time forward, Andrew begins to go about the streets in rags, as though his mind has become muddled. For many years, the saint endures mockery and insults. With indifference, he undergoes beatings, hunger, thirst, cold and heat, begging alms and giving them away to the poor. For his great forbearance and humility, the saint receives from the Lord the gift of prophecy and wisdom, saving many from spiritual perils and unmasking the impiety of others. One day, in the middle of Holy Lent, the saint is playing his game on the paved surface of the Forum. True to his habit, sometimes running, sometimes dancing. When he stops in front of the great door of the Senate, looking closely at the statue legs represented there. One of the passers-by, seeing the holy man gazing at them, gives him a slap, saying,
"You idiot! What are you staring at?"
The blessed man replies,
"You fool in your spirit! I am looking at the visible idols, but you are a spiritual thong leg." "And a serpent, and of the viper's brood. For your soul's axles and your heart's spiritual legs are crooked and going to Hades. Behold, Hades has opened its mouth, waiting to swallow you up. For you are a fornicator and an adulterer. And you offer sacrifices to the devil every day."
When the man hears this, he is overcome by shudders and wonders in his heart.
Does he know this from God or from demons? But how can he know God? A foolish and crazy man that he is.
Leaving this spot, the blessed man comes out on the paved surface of the Forum where the so-called saleswomen are seated, selling costly embellishments. There he stops, contemplates the wares being offered for sale, and exclaims,
"My goodness, straw and dust."
Some of those who stand there do not understand what he says, but rather replies,
What is this nonsense that the fool is talking of?
Some laugh, others mock him. Still others slap him, jostling him and spitting on him. Now as the righteous man stands there contemplating the whole Forum, an old man passes by and says,
"Oh, you fool, you fool! Why do you shout straw and phantoms? If you have straw to sell, go to the Animedolium and sell it there."
"You fool! Go and look for a tomb that can receive you after 2 days."
And just as the holy man tells him, so it turns out. 2 days later, the old man brings his life to an end. And here, while the holy man is looking sharply in all directions and shouting, a young man asks him with meekness,
"By the gods of heaven, what do you see, standing there?"
"I see a dream, my son. For this vain life is shadow and smoke.
On occasion, those under control of the evil one would make fun of him, or even beat him, after which grave consequences would surely follow in their life. He eventually comes to reside in the monastery of Panagolaki.
Now we're at the Panagolaki Monastery. This is the entrance.
And he falls asleep in the Lord in 1974. The following is a miracle accounted by John on his blog. My grandparents on my mother's side were both from villages in the northern areas of Peloponnesus. But when they were married, they moved to Kalamata, where my mother and her siblings were born. All of them have fond memories of Haralambi. Among the most astonishing memories comes from my grandfather Vasily. According to him, one day during the German occupation of World War II, the Germans gathered the men in the center of Kalamata. Among those present was my grandfather. Haralambi also came, but paid no attention to the orders of the German soldiers. Instead, he walked through the crowd and kept on walking. The Nazi soldiers began yelling at him to stop, but he kept walking, courageously, as if going about his daily business. He wouldn't even turn around. When the Germans saw his disobedience, they opened fire on him with machine guns to make an example. All of the Greeks of Kalamari who reverenced Haralambi were amazed when they saw that not one bullet touched him, despite the Germans being experienced gunmen. The Germans were obviously dumbfounded and went to capture him. But when they saw he was an ascetic, they let him free. When my grandfather relates this story, which he saw with his own eyes and which is recorded by others in Haralambi's biography, astonishment still sweeps over his face. Many years later, after I read the biography of Haralambi, says John, I told him some extra details that he did not know. When Haralambi later went to various houses on his daily route, people would ask him what happened. He would then reach into his pocket and show them a handful of bullets. He would say that the bullets bounced off him and ended up miraculously in his pocket. When I told my grandfather about this, he just fell silent, in awe. My mother, Panagiota, continues John, was baptized with the old calendar in the monastery of Panagolaki in the mid-1950s. She remembers Haralambi's visual appearance as being striking. She says she was never afraid of him as a young girl, but saw him as a holy man. One time he even blessed her. She says she would feel sorry for him, would sometimes see young boys throw rocks at him and wondered where he went in the winter. She also remembers him preaching about the end of the world. In 1998, as John relates, I was speaking with Father Pantaleimon at the schismatic Old Calendar Monastery of the Holy Transfiguration in Brooklyn, Massachusetts. And he told me that he also knew Haralambi in his youth in Kalamata. According to him, he told me that his relics had been lost and were in a room with many other relics of monks at Panagolaki Monastery. When visiting, he was determined to find the relics. Entering the room, he noticed a sweet fragrance. Following the fragrance, he came to a box which said, Haralambi.
Имаме две воли, едната зла, едната добра. А добрата воля на Бога, злата на дяволичия, ние сме в една война по ума.
On the feast day of Saint Elijah the prophet, a baby boy is born in the Bulgarian village of Bailovo. In talks with certain people, Dobry confides in them extraordinary experiences he has. He discusses times when he is mystically exhorted to go out and do things. To him, having having half a piece of bread and a potato means having everything.